There is a country where nearly everything alive is found nowhere else on Earth. And almost none of it gets to live in peace. This is the Philippines. More than 7,000 islands. So cut off from the world that, mile for mile, more unique life is crowded here than anywhere else on the planet. Creatures that live on one island and no other. Some down to their last few hundred. But being rare buys them nothing here. Because these islands belong to hunters. Something that drops out of the branches without a sound. Something coiled and waiting in the leaves underfoot. And under the water, killers that were here long before us, striking before their prey ever sees them come. So how does the rarest life on Earth survive when everything around it is built to hunt it down? How do the hunted last a single night? And how do any of them hold on at all, as the forests and reefs that made them vanish year after year? From the canopy to the coral, these are the stories of the rarest creatures left alive, hunted from every direction and running out of time. Night falls over a Philippine rainforest, and something with eyes bigger in volume than its own brain waits motionless on a branch. The Philippine Tarsier is small enough to close a fist around, yet its eyes are fixed so rigidly in their sockets that it has to swivel its whole head just to look behind itself. Every call it makes to its own kind travels above what a human ear will ever pick up. The species has barely changed in tens of millions of years, one of the oldest primate lineages still alive anywhere. Its own name comes from its ankle bones, stretched long enough to work like a spring loaded beneath each leg. It hunts entirely by leaping through the dark at insects still in flight, snatching them out of the air with both hands, the only primate on Earth that survives on meat alone. When the Tarsier's night finally ends, the forest above it belongs to something people once called the monkey-eating eagle, one of the largest and rarest eagles left alive. Its stare alone can hold a branch still for an hour, fixed on a gap in the canopy that nothing else in the forest thinks to watch. A single breeding pair raises only one chick every 2 years at most, one of the slowest reproductive cycles of any bird of prey alive. Then something below shifts, and the head that hasn't moved in an hour turns all the way toward it. It drops from the branch in near silence, wings barely moving, closing the distance before the macaque below ever looks up. One strike from talons built to crush bone is enough, and the eagle feeds on the forest floor exactly where its prey falls. For every macaque an eagle takes, hundreds more spend their whole lives simply watching the sky between meals. They move in troops of dozens, ranging from the treetops down to the shoreline whenever a falling tide exposes something worth eating. Troops are held together by the females, who stay in the same group their entire lives, while young males leave to find mates elsewhere. Much of the day goes to grooming each other, which does more for the troop's social bonds than it does for removing parasites. Crabs, shellfish, and even birds' eggs all count as food, which is why the species carries another name entirely: the crab-eating macaque. They are strong swimmers too, diving well below the surface to pull shellfish straight off the seabed rather than waiting for the tide to expose them. In parts of their range, they've learned to hammer open shells with loose stones, making them one of the small handful of wild primates anywhere known to use tools. The macaques that survive the sky still have the ground to worry about. A reticulated python can grow longer than a car, patterned in camouflage so precise it can vanish completely into a single patch of leaf litter. It finds prey mostly by smell, flicking a forked tongue to pull scent out of the air and read it with an organ in the roof of its mouth. When something finally passes close enough, it strikes and wraps around it in tightening loops. What kills the prey is not suffocation, as most people assume, but the sudden loss of blood flow to the heart and brain, which shuts the body down within seconds. Follow that same forest floor down to the nearest river, and the water hides one of the rarest crocodiles left on the planet. The Philippine crocodile lives only in freshwater rivers, lakes and marshes, found nowhere else on Earth, smaller than the saltwater crocodile, but just as lethal an ambush hunter. It waits just beneath the surface for anything that comes to drink, then drags it under before it ever has a chance to run. Follow that same river down to the coast, and the crocodile's freshwater world gives way to the open sea. Not everything living in these waters is a predator. Offshore over the seagrass meadows, a dugong grazes for hours at a time, uprooting whole mouthfuls of grass and leaving trails across the seabed that look almost ploughed. It's one of the few marine mammals that eats nothing but plants, and its rounded shape is very likely the reason sailors' mermaid legends exist at all. The dugong isn't the only grazer working that same seagrass meadow. Green sea turtles feed on it too, and unlike most other sea turtle species, they stay strictly vegetarian once they reach adulthood. That plant-only diet is exactly what turns their body fat green, which is where the species gets its name, not from the colour of its shell at all. newly hatched turtles spend their first several years drifting far out in the open ocean before ever returning to a coastline like this one. They can hold their breath for hours at a time, their heart rate slowing to almost nothing while they rest under a ledge or in open sand. The temperature of the sand around a nest decides whether the hatchlings that emerge will be mostly male or mostly female, with warmer sand producing more females. Every few years, the same females cross thousands of kilometres of open ocean to lay their eggs on the exact beach where they hatched decades before. Not every turtle on this reef eats the way the green sea turtle does. The hawksbill turtle has a curved, beak-like mouth, built for reaching into cracks in the coral that no other turtle can fit into. Its shell scutes overlap like roof tiles, unlike the flatter, non-overlapping plates of every other sea turtle species. It feeds almost entirely on sponges, many of them toxic enough to kill most other animals that try to eat them, yet the hawksbill swallows them whole without any trouble. Clearing sponges off the reef this way keeps space open for new coral to grow, tying the turtle's survival directly to the reefs. Its shell was once the most valuable in the ocean to humans, prized for centuries as tortoiseshell, and that alone pushed the species to the edge of extinction. The same reef that feeds the hawksbill is patrolled by one of its largest residents. A Napoleon wrasse can grow to the size of a grown man, with thick lips and a bulging forehead that only gets bigger with age. Unlike most fish this size, it shows little fear of divers, often swimming close to investigate rather than fleeing. It is one of the few reef fish willing to eat prey most others avoid, cracking open sea urchins, boxfish, and even the venomous crown of thorns, starfish, that are actively eating the coral around it. Every Napoleon wrasse starts life as a female, and the largest, most dominant fish in a group will eventually change sex and take over as the resident male. That same size and rarity have made it a prime target for the live reef fish trade, and wild numbers are now a fraction of what they once were. Beyond the edge of that same reef, where the coral drops into open blue water, something far larger patrols. By day, many hammerheads gather into large schools, an unusual habit for a shark that hunts alone once night falls. A hammerhead shark's head is shaped the way it is for a reason. Spread that wide, it packs in far more sensory organs than a normal shark's skull ever could. That width lets it scan a much larger stretch of sand in a single pass, hunting for exactly one thing hiding just beneath the surface. It finds a stingray buried in the sand and presses it flat with that wide head before it can react, holding it pinned long enough to bite. That same sandy seafloor the sharks patrol from above hides something far smaller and pound for pound far more dangerous. A mantis shrimp strike is one of the fastest movements in the entire animal kingdom, snapping its claw so quickly that it heats the water around it and briefly creates a flash of light. That strike hits with enough force to shatter the shells of crabs and snails outright, and captive mantis shrimp have been known to crack aquarium glass. The same strike defends its burrow against any intruder that gets too close, prey and rival alike. Some species pair with a single mate for life, sharing that burrow for years, an unusually loyal arrangement for a crustacean. Its eyes are just as extreme, built with more types of colour receptors than any other animal on Earth, letting it see parts of the light spectrum humans cannot even imagine. Not everything on this reef survives by hitting hard. A pygmy seahorse is small enough to perch on a fingertip, and it spends its entire life clinging to a single sea fan coral, matching its colour and even the shape of its bumps almost exactly. Camouflage this precise means it rarely has to move at all, letting the current do the work of bringing food within reach of its tiny snout. As with every seahorse species, it's the male that carries the eggs, keeping them safe in a pouch until they're ready to be released fully formed. Leave the reef behind for open water, and scale changes completely. An ocean sunfish is the heaviest bony fish in the world, built almost like a swimming head with no real tail at all. Rather than beating a tail it doesn't really have, it swims by flapping its tall dorsal and anal fins in unison, more like a pair of wings than a fish's tail. It spends part of its day basking on its side at the surface, letting seabirds and small fish pick parasites straight off its skin. A single female is believed to release more eggs in one spawning than any other vertebrate alive, with some estimates running into the hundreds of millions. Leave the open ocean behind and follow the coastline back toward land, and the water changes again at the mouth of every river. Saltwater crocodiles are capable of swimming far out into open sea between islands, riding currents for hundreds of kilometres to reach new territory. That ability alone makes them the only crocodile species found scattered across islands as distant as India and northern Australia. It is also the largest living reptile on Earth, with mature males often reaching 5 metres in length. Closer to shore, in the shallow water a crocodile mostly ignores, something far less dangerous paddles between the reeds. A dark cap and eye stripe cut across its cinnamon orange face, paired with a mottled brown body and a bright green wing patch found on no other duck sharing its range. The Philippine duck is one of the country's few native waterfowl, dabbling for seeds and small aquatic animals in marshes found nowhere else. Habitat loss across its wetlands has made it far rarer than it once was, and sightings this clear are becoming harder to find every year. Follow the same shoreline up onto dry land, and the water gives way to something built to live entirely out of it. A coconut crab is the largest land-dwelling arthropod alive, strong enough in its claws to crack open a coconut most humans can't even break with a hammer. That same grip strength shows up in how it forages too, finding a mature coconut and dragging the whole thing along as it moves from place to place instead of leaving it behind. The same grip that hauls a coconut across the sand is just as capable of seizing and killing a full-grown seabird that wanders too close. Further out where that same river mixes with the sea, a dolphin surfaces that looks almost unfinished. No beak at all, just a rounded head and a permanent, gentle-looking smile. The Irrawaddy dolphin hunts by spitting a jet of water to herd fish into a tighter group before closing in to feed, one of the only dolphins known to do this. It favours river mouths and brackish coastal water over the open ocean, and pollution and fishing nets along exactly those waters have made it one of the rarest dolphins alive. The mangroves lining that same coast hold one of the loudest, and now one of the rarest, birds in the entire archipelago. The Philippine cockatoo once filled these trees by the thousands, its calls carrying for miles at dawn and dusk. Trapping for the pet trade and the loss of those same mangroves have wiped out most of its range, leaving only a handful of strongholds where it still nests in the wild. Follow the same coastline inland, up the freshwater streams the mangroves feed into, and the trail ends at a turtle that rests motionless on rocks half submerged in the current. Its shell ranges from brown to almost black, and a single pale yellow line behind each ear has earned it a nickname, the bow-tie turtle. The Philippine forest turtle spends most of its life like this, barely moving in shaded streams where almost no one ever sees it. It was scarcely known to science for most of the last century, and it is still poached so heavily for the pet trade that it has vanished from rivers where it was once common. Follow that same stream back up into the high forest, and the canopy overhead belongs to one of the loudest flyers in it. A rufous hornbill's wing beats are audible from the ground long before the bird itself comes into view, a sound caused by feathers that lack the soft flight structure most birds rely on for silence. It feeds mostly on fruit, swallowing it whole and later depositing the seeds far from the tree that grew it, reseeding the same forest it lives in. When the hornbill settles for the night, the same fruiting trees draw out something far larger. The giant golden-crowned flying fox is the heaviest bat alive, with a wingspan that can stretch wider than a grown man is tall. By day it roosts in large, densely packed colonies, wrapping those same wings around its body like a cloak while it sleeps. Despite its size, it eats nothing but fruit and nectar, using eyesight and smell to find food in total darkness rather than echolocation at all. It shares those same fruiting trees with a bat a fraction of its size, one with tubular nostrils that stick out from its face like tiny straws. No one is entirely sure why its nose is shaped that way, though it may sharpen the bat's sense of smell while it feeds in total darkness. The same darkness that hides the bats hides something they might easily mistake for one. A Lorquin's atlas moth can have a wingspan close to that of the bat flying right beside it, and as an adult it has no mouth at all, living for only about a week on nothing but the energy it stored as a caterpillar. That same canopy the moth flutters through is also crossed by something that never really flies at all. The Philippine flying lemur, also called a colugo, has a skin membrane stretching from its neck to the tips of its fingers, toes and tail, more surface area for gliding than almost any other mammal alive. It can cover the length of a football field in a single glide between trees, losing only a small amount of height along the way, and despite the name, it is neither a lemur nor capable of powered flight. The colugo isn't the only glider using this same trick to move through the canopy without ever touching the ground. A white-spotted flying lizard, a type of Draco or flying dragon, has folds of skin along its ribs that unfold into wing-like membranes the moment it leaps, launching from high in one tree and gliding in a controlled arc to the trunk of another. A panther flying frog uses the same idea with a completely different body plan, spreading webbed feet nearly as wide as its whole body to glide from branch to branch instead of climbing down and back up. It spends its entire life in the high canopy, only ever coming down to breed in pools of water that collect in the hollows of trees, never touching the forest floor at all. Everything gliding through that same canopy eventually has to come back down, and the forest floor below holds a very different kind of survivor. The Philippine pangolin is covered head to tail in overlapping scales made of the same material as human fingernails, the only mammal anywhere built this way. When threatened, it rolls into a tight ball that even a predator with claws or teeth usually can't force open. It feeds almost entirely on ants and termites, using a tongue that can extend longer than its own body to reach deep inside a nest. The same nests the pangolin raids also draw in something else after dark. A Tokay gecko can grow close to a foot long, one of the largest gecko species in the world, and its bite is strong enough to draw blood if it clamps onto a finger and refuses to let go. It strikes fast when prey is right in front of it, seizing and swallowing a cricket in a single quick bite. Prey that isn't offered up so easily gets a longer look first. It holds completely still, tracking a hornworm's every move, before finally lunging forward to snatch it. Follow the gecko's hunting ground up into the mossy high-altitude forests of northern Luzon, and the leaf litter hides a rodent bigger than most house cats. The northern Luzon giant cloud rat feeds mostly on leaves, bark and fruit, coming down from the trees mainly at night, and it's found only in a handful of mountain ranges, above a certain elevation, nowhere else on the entire planet. That same high forest floor is shared by a bird named for a wound it doesn't actually have. The Luzon bleeding heart pigeon carries a bright red-orange patch on its chest that looks exactly like a fresh, open wound, a pattern that almost certainly warns off predators rather than inviting them. It spends nearly its entire life on the forest floor, walking rather than flying, and freezing completely still at the first sign of danger. That stillness means nothing to the one predator on this forest floor that hunts as much by scent as by sight. A Philippine cobra's venom is potent enough that a single bite can kill a grown adult without prompt treatment, and its threat display alone, hood flared and body raised, is enough to make most animals back away. When a threat doesn't back away, the strike comes fast. Hood fully spread, and a bite that delivers venom in a single motion before the target even registers what happened. Not everything sharing that same danger runs from it in fear. Like many of its Malkoha relatives, it likely follows disturbances on the forest floor, snapping up insects and small animals that break cover when something larger moves through. Its bare, brightly coloured face skin is unusual even among Philippine forest birds, and it remains one of the least studied birds in the entire country. Above that same forest floor, one of the largest butterflies in the country moves in slow gliding wing beats between patches of sun. A Magellan's birdwing can have a wingspan wider than a human hand, with males and females coloured so differently that early collectors once mistook them for two separate species entirely. Come back down to the leaf litter, and on the island of Romblon alone, a burrow entrance hides one of the country's largest spiders. The Romblon black tarantula waits just inside its burrow for insects and other small prey to wander close, then ambushes them in a single, fast lunge. It was only formally described and named in recent years, and much of its basic biology is still unknown. Shift far west to the forests of Palawan, and a very different kind of display plays out on that same forest floor. A male Palawan peacock-pheasant fans out feathers covered in iridescent blue-green eye spots, angling them to catch whatever light filters down through the canopy during his courtship display. That performance is aimed at a female watching from just a few feet away, and males with the brightest, most symmetrical eye spots are consistently the ones she chooses. Follow that same forest down to the riverbank, and the display gives way to something built for a very different kind of escape. A Philippine sailfin lizard has long, flattened toes, fringed with scales that let it run flat across the surface of water for short bursts when startled, rather than sinking. It spends most of its time in branches, overhanging rivers, dropping straight down into the water at the first sign of danger and swimming off submerged. Not far from that same riverbank, in the deep shade beneath the canopy, a small, intensely coloured bird flicks through the leaf litter alone. A blue-breasted pita is far more often heard than seen, its call carrying through the undergrowth, long before the bird itself ever comes into view. It nests low to the ground in dense cover, one of many forest floor specialists in the Philippines, whose entire world is disappearing, along with the forest itself. That same disappearing forest, on the island of Balabac, is the only home of the smallest hoofed mammal on the planet. A Philippine mouse deer stands barely taller than a house cat, and despite the name, it is not a deer at all, but a separate, far more ancient lineage of even-toed mammal. It survives largely by staying hidden, freezing completely still at the first hint of danger rather than trying to outrun it. That same stillness is exactly what fails against a predator that hunts by sound alone in total darkness. A Philippine eagle owl's feathers are edged with a soft fringe that breaks up the noise of air moving over them, letting it swoop down on prey in near total silence. It is one of the largest owls in the country, capable of taking mammals as large as the mouse deer it shares this same forest floor with. Shift east to the Visayan Islands, and a completely different forest holds one of the rarest pigs on Earth. A Visayan warty pig gets its name from the fleshy, wart-like growths on a male's face, which thicken with age and may help cushion blows during fights with rival males. During the breeding season, males also grow a long, coarse mane down the spine, raised to look larger whenever they display or fight. Hunting and the loss of almost all of its original forest have reduced it to a handful of surviving populations, all confined to fragments of habitat, a fraction of the size they once covered. The Visayan spotted deer shares those same last remaining forest fragments, and its situation is, if anything, even more precarious. Only a handful of confirmed wild populations remain, all restricted to the same small pockets of forest the warty pig depends on, and both species were once common enough to be considered farmland pests across the region they now barely survive in. Both the pig and the deer share this shrinking forest with one more resident, a leopard cat found nowhere outside these same islands. Barely larger than a house cat, it hunts rodents, birds and insects through the undergrowth at night, taking advantage of exactly the same disturbance and habitat pressure that threatens its neighbours. its entire known range has shrunk alongside theirs, tracking the same forest loss that has pushed all three species toward the same uncertain future. Move to the Calamian Island group, and a different deer entirely grazes in small, wary groups at the forest edge. The Calamian deer survives today almost entirely because of one small island where hunting has been kept out, with only scattered remnants of its population left anywhere else. Farther north, on the small volcanic island of Camagin, a parrot found nowhere else has a resting habit that looks almost broken. The Camagin hanging parrot sleeps hanging upside down from a branch, tucked in like a tiny bat, rather than perched upright the way almost every other bird does. Back on the larger islands, in what remains of the country's lowland forest, the Philippine brown deer moves through undergrowth thick enough to disappear into within seconds. It is more adaptable than many of its island relatives, surviving in fragmented and secondary forest, where more specialised species have already disappeared, though hunting pressure keeps its numbers far below what that adaptability alone would allow. Above that same lowland forest, a smaller relative of the monkey-eating eagle patrols the mid-canopy instead of the treetops. It's only a fraction of its larger cousin size, but carries the same short crest and the same sharp, forward-facing stare. The Philippine hawk eagle hunts birds and small mammals in fast, agile pursuit through gaps in the canopy, relying on speed and surprise rather than the raw size its larger cousin uses. Follow that same lowland forest down to its edge, where it opens into grassland, and the largest native land animal in the entire country grazes. A tamaraw is a dwarf buffalo found only on the island of Mindoro, smaller and far more solitary than its water buffalo relatives on the mainland, and considerably more aggressive when cornered. It was once hunted to the edge of extinction across the whole island, and decades of protection inside a single dedicated reserve now hold almost the entire remaining wild population. Every calf born there is one more animal added to a population that, for most of the last century, only ever seemed to be shrinking. Across all 7,000 islands, the same pattern repeats. Forest gives way to river, river gives way to reef, and every edge between them holds a species that exists nowhere else on Earth. Many of the animals in this episode now survive in only a handful of the places they once called home. But the tamaraw calves still being born in the one place left that protects them, the cockatoos still nesting in what mangrove remains, and the cloud rats still moving through the high mist forests of Luzon are proof that recovery is still possible wherever the forest is given room to hold on. The dry season will end, the rains will return, and across these islands, the same struggle for space begins again, exactly as it always has. This is the Philippines, a land of untamed beauty and wildlife at every turn, Now, if you don't want to miss the most extraordinary wildlife of Everglades National Park, check out this video.